When is the best time to visit Cedar Point to ride Top Thrill 2? There's no denying that Cedar Point is going to be the place to be this summer for all thrill seekers. And that is thanks to Top Thrill 2, the Point's new for 2024 record-breaking triple launch coaster. So it's very important for you to know about the best times to visit Cedar Point this year, so you're not stuck with a 3+ hour long line for Top Thrill 2. And then stay tuned, because later in the video, I'm going to share with you my favorite times to visit Cedar Point so I can avoid the crowds and save some money while doing it. Starting off, should you visit opening day or weekend? No, absolutely not. While I will most likely be there due to filming for the channel purposes, opening day and weekend is never a good time to visit Cedar Point, and here is why. Operations and staffing. Cedar Point is located in the bustling metropolis of Sandusky, Ohio, which means that they have to rely on getting kids out of school and college for the summer so the park can have better staffing. If you visit opening weekend, then just prepare yourself for some rides not being open and food stands closed. Not to mention, but lots of training going on, which will result in longer and slower moving lines. I love Cedar Point, but it's just the truth, because that weekend is always rough. So if you've been following the Top Thrill 2 project for quite some time now, and you're just itching to ride it, then I recommend visiting the second weekend that Cedar Point is open. Let the park sort through the opening weekend before visiting. Trust me on that. Now, the nice thing about Cedar Point is that starting on May 16th, they go into their daily operations. So you could plan a trip to the point on a weekday during the last 2 weeks of May. And this is typically a great time to visit, but just be warned of the school groups, because there is a lot of them. But usually the crowds are still pretty light overall during this time. And now it's time for you to learn about my first theme park recommendations tip of the video to help enhance your trip even more. Another great benefit of visiting Cedar Point during the last 2 weeks of May is the on-site hotel and cabin rentals are so much cheaper than they are in peak season. So if you're looking at ways to save some money but still want the premium Cedar Point experience, then this is a great option for you. A simple rule when it comes to getting the most out of your day at a theme park and potentially saving a lot of money at the same time. Try to always visit during the week. Saturday and Sundays are always going to be much busier. Mondays and Fridays are decent to visit, but usually are busier due to people extending their weekend for their Cedar Point getaway. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are by far the 3 best days to visit. Again, if you are able to time your trip out this way. The first 2 weeks of June are also great days to visit. Schools are just starting to let their students out for the summer, and there are always a bunch of graduation parties being held during the first few weekends of June. And during the week, the park is open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. So while you will not be able to get a pure night ride on Top Thrill 2, you can get a sunset one, which is just about as good. TPR tip: if you want a Top Thrill 2 night ride, then you should know that Cedar Point is open until 10 p.m. on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays during June. From June 15th through August 18th, the park closes at 10 p.m. or later every single night. Cedar Point's peak season also runs from these dates as well, and this is when the park will be at its busiest, which also means that all the Cedar Point hotels and all the hotels nearby will be at their peak pricing. So something to keep in mind when you're planning your trip. TPR tip: Cedar Point hotels are not the only ones at their peak pricing. That is because every hotel in the area will be more expensive during this time period based on the demand. Now, instead of wasting an hour or so looking for hotels around Cedar Point, just watch this 8-minute video where I showcase with you all the best Cedar Point and non-Cedar Point hotels in the Sandusky area. And for your convenience, you can find a link to that video in the description of this one. So if you have to visit Cedar Point between June 15th and August 18th, then be sure to plan accordingly, knowing that you'll be spending more money on lodging. Which brings me to my next point. If you're planning on visiting during the weekends or during this time period, then I recommend investing into a fast lane skip the line add-on pass. Again, if you can, I recommend visiting during the weekdays, of course. And with Top Thrill 2, it's important to note that for at least the first year of Cedar Point Strata Coaster being in operation, the Fast Lane Plus will only get you one Top Thrill 2 ride each day. Now, if you have all season Fast Lane, then you get to experience Top Thrill 2 as much as you want during your day. Something to keep in mind before you visit, since it is kind of confusing and it's a big deal. Before I get back into my other recommended time periods to visit Cedar Point for Top Thrill 2, you might be wondering, why do I think that Cedar Point will be having a record-breaking year in 2024? Well, it's pretty obvious it's because of Top Thrill 2, the newly reimagined Top Thrill Dragster. This thrill machine takes on new trains, new launches, a rollback, and of course, the 420-foot tall spike and the 420-foot tall top hat. This is the largest roller coaster remodel project in the history of the world, and I do not know if we will ever see in our lifetime a park take on this magnitude of a project and make it into what could be a top 10 potential coaster. Top Thrill 2 will be a huge hit among families and thrill seekers, and this new coaster will give Cedar Point a very special buzz around the midways over the next few years. This coaster is a big deal, and people from all around the world are planning on visiting America's Rockin' Roller Coaster to check out this new coaster this year. Now back to the calendar. After August 18th, things start to calm down a little bit at Cedar Point, and the park is only open until 8 p.m. during the rest of August, except for Friday and Saturday nights. During the week of the last 2 weeks of August is always a nice time to visit. You're going to find the crowds to be lighter and the hotel rates lower. TPR tip: the only negative thing about visiting Cedar Point during this time is the park is usually short-staffed, so not every snack stand or not popular ride will be open. Cedar Point daily operations end after Labor Day, but as you can see here, the park is open almost every Thursday and Friday during September. This is due to the park's Halloween event, Hallow Weekends. These weeks are a very underrated time period to visit Cedar Point due to these extended weekends in September, especially if you visit on a Thursday night and stay at the park Friday and then maybe sometime on Saturday. Cedar Point's Hallow Weekend event is always a great time, and I do recommend checking it out. But the best part about this time of the year is that you're able to experience tons of night rides on your favorite coasters. TPR tip: keep in mind that the weather around Cedar Point is very unpredictable this time of the year. You could be faced with a ton of rain, cooler temperatures, or possible snow flurries. This is why I highly recommend visiting the park in September rather than October if you're able to. So when is my favorite time of the year to visit Cedar Point? Well, I always try to plan a trip during the first 2 weeks of June and the last 2 weeks of August. Now I know that staffing probably will not be 100%, but that's okay. I also know that I'm going to be saving some money on my hotel room for the family, which is never a bad thing. And of course, please do not forget, weekdays are always better to visit than weekends. If you are planning on visiting Cedar Point in 2024, I really do highly recommend looking into the Fast Lane Pass option if you're able to. So if you are planning a trip to Cedar Point this year, then you'll want to watch my Cedar Point trip guide video as you see right here, where you will learn everything you need to know about Cedar Point, including ways to save money and time during your Cedar Point vacation. So if you found this video to be helpful, please give it a like. And I want to know, when are you planning a trip to Cedar Point to ride Top Thrill 2? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to smile today, think positive, and keep riding coasters.